Welcome to the station crew. Enjoy your stay.
Botanists in Space Station 14 are tasked with growing specific plants for either food, medicinal purposes, or even just recreation. Botany has no true goal. Yes, people can starve to death, but you aren't the only way for food to enter the station. For example, cargo can always order things like pizza, salvage can always find food. You're not an essential part of the station, which is really good because that means this role in general is very open ended and it's a great place to learn and just kind of relax. Botany in general is a rather relaxing profession, in my opinion. The mechanics of botany, to get started, are very, very simple. It is probably one of the easiest jobs in the entire game, and I'll just explain it as easily as I can. There are three tools that are good for botany. The two that you will require are a mini hoe, and you don't technically require plant clippers, but you're going to want them. What is also really good for botany is a spade in case a plant dies, or you just want to remove one. And you need a hatchet if you're going to grow things like wood, or if you're going to get into high levels of botanical mutations, which I will cover towards the end, and it's going to be hard to cover. Well, what do you even do? Well, you're going to be working with the chef. And if the chef isn't there, you're going to be doing whatever you want pretty much. Even then, just feel free to do whatever you want, but try to work with the chef. He or she are going to need your plants and crops in order to, well, be able to cook most things. And before we even start, you might notice that there is a red blinking light in the middle of hydroponics trays. This is a pretty common event. If you shift-click a hydroponics tray, it'll tell you everything you need to know about it. It'll say, everything below the maintenance panel is important. It has nothing planted in it. It is filled with weeds and the water and nutrient level. In order to remove weeds, you just have to take your hoe and left click, and it is instantaneous and very easy to do. Now, how do we plant a seed? Very, very simple. To plant a seed, you just go over to your Mega Seed Servitor, which will always be in Botany. Sometimes there will be seeds in your locker, but in this case, it doesn't seem to be any. Either way, you will take your apple seeds or whatever you want, and you just put them in your hand, and you left click a tray. If you shift click it, an apple tree is growing here. And every single plant in the game is grown the same way. You just put the seed directly into a hydroponics tray, and, well, you wait. Well, what if you want to not use all your apple seeds, but you want to grow more apple trees? Well, this is what the plant clipper is for. The plant clippers allows you to simply left click any seed, and it'll say you take a sample, it will put the sample in your hand, and it'll be an identical clone of whatever is planted. So if you notice, the plant yield on this is 3, which means there will be 3 apples grown, and the plant potency is 10. Well, a more advanced mechanic is once you take the seedling and you plant that, in your Nutrimax, there will be things called Easy Nutrient Bottles and Robust Harvest Bottles. What we're interested in is Robust Harvest. Nutrient is not all that important. I have never really seen nutrients in a basin become a problem, and I'm not going to inform you about it, because if you've already got to the point where you're out of nutrients, you probably already have well over an hour in the botany, and I'm sure you can figure it out. It's not that complicated. So if I take my bottle of Robust Harvest and drop, let's just say, half the bottle, so 15 of the 30 units into the apple tree, what's going to happen is the potency of the seed is going to increase, and I will show you what that means when it is done growing. And I'll be back in about 30 seconds to show you what you can do as a more advanced mechanic. I have returned, and my first batch of apples is complete. In order to harvest things like apples, you just simply left click. And if you notice, since it's something like an apple tree, the tree stays planted. And it's not like wheat, which is currently growing, that will not be replanted. You will have to replant wheat if you harvest it. It is not like a tree, it is not a reproducing vine. It is a one-time crop. And if you remember, these apple trees, this apple tree was a clone of this one, but it was given 15 units of Robust Harvest. And I'll keep in mind the size of a normal apple, and this is the size of a normal wheat. I gave this wheat 15 units of Robust Harvest as well. So if I take a clipping of it and examine the wheat packet, you'll notice the plant potency is 50 when it's normally 10. Well, you'll see what that means when it is done growing, but what you could do, and wheat is a very common ingredient, wheat is a very common crop that the chef needs, and it is very good to grow high potency ones, because high potency means you'll make more flour per crop. And you could always just dedicate a few trays to it, and make sure you keep up with the weeds. I'll be honest, I don't know what the hell the weeds do. I don't know if they do anything, but the blinking light is really annoying, and that's enough of a reason. Take a sample of these apples. Notice how the plant yield went down. Well, that means we're only going to produce 2 apples from this tree, but the potency is 50. What does that mean? If I harvest apples, notice how insanely large these apples are compared to each other. And that actually has a mechanical difference. So if I take the normal sized apple, which is quite large, and press Z to eat it, you eat it in 1 bite. But if I take the gigantic apple and press Z, it takes 2 bites. If I get something like a blender, oh my god, the cow! Holy shit! Sorry. Notice how much is in the small apple. If I just grind it, 2 nutriment, 1 vitamin. But the giant apple, it was 6 nutriment and 3 vitamin. So vitamins and nutriment is what nutriments cure hunger, vitamins heal you a little bit. So that is one minor example of what potency does. But yet again, we lost an apple, but in the end, it's a net gain through nutriment and potency. And if we examine the wheat, you'll notice the same thing. The wheat is hilariously big. If you get something like wheats or apples or whatever, and you forget to trim them, you can always take it over to the seed extractor. But you notice how it said the wheat bushel has no seeds? Well, the thing is, if you increase the potency too much, you can't get seeds out of it. But if I use normal wheat seeds on it, which only have a potency of 5, I think I said 10 earlier, my mistake, you'll get the seeds. So just keep in mind that robust harvest will make it so your seeds can't, it will make it so your plants don't have seeds, but they'll never prevent you from using plant clippers on them. So you can understand the mechanics are somewhat complicated there. And if I show you the difference of the wheat, so this is a normal wheat bushel with no modifiers, and this is a wheat bushel with 15 units of robust harvest. The normal wheat bushel will have 5 flour, and the bigger one isn't much better. It's only 7 flour versus 5, and it does have more nutriment. But when you consider the fact that the robust harvest is free with your job and it can be made infinitely by chem, it is worth trying to min-max certain crops, because, I mean, what else are you going to be doing? I mean, it's totally acceptable to just grow the crops as is and not have to, like, stress over being perfect with it, but growing giant crops is really satisfying. So there is another mechanic for botany that's not complicated, but kind of buggy. Or, if it's not buggy, it's just janky. I don't know I don't really know. But you're supposed to be able to swab one plant to another to swap its genes. So, for example, apple trees, as I mentioned earlier, will be able to be harvested multiple times. Like, I've harvested a lot of apples from this tree. So if I want to plant, let's just say, a basic apple tree, and I want the apple tree to grow wheat, so let me get some wheat seeds. What you're supposed to be able to do, and it might work, is you put the wheat in, you will take your swab, you left click on the wheat, which I desire to have wheat trees, you carefully collect pollen, and you're supposed to be able to just take the swab and swab it onto the plant you want to cross-pollinate with, and it'll say you carefully dust pollen. And theoretically, if this all works, when this plant is done growing, it will be a wheat tree, for lack of a better word. It will still look like an apple tree, but when you harvest it, it will be wheat apples. Okay, so the apples are done, and when you grow them, or when you pick them, they will look like apples. And if everything worked right, if I grind them up in a beaker, when they get grounded up, they should theoretically have flour in them. And as you can see, I have successfully made flour apples, and the huge benefit of this is that it's going to grow more flour apples, which will up your production of flour considerably because you don't have to keep replanting. This is just one minor usage of sterile swabbing, and you can get way crazier with it, and it's useful for things like mutations, which I will cover next. I've pondered how I was going to teach this for a long time, and the answer is I can't. if I even show you the botany guide, there is this quip about you can determine the phenotype of a plant by simply growing and observing them. So, I honestly don't have a way of teaching this effectively. So, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to grab 5 wheat seeds. Okay? I'm going to plant all of them. These are all just default wheat seeds, nothing done to them. Here, we have a jug of unstable mutagen. And in order to get unstable mutagen, you're going to have to ask Chem for it, and they're most likely not going to deny you because most people are aware that it's just Botany trying to mutate. And I will get a dropper. You want a dropper because if you use a beaker, you will basically be forced to use 5 units at a time, and you can't have a more subtle control. So, from left to right, I'm going to do 1 units, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, and 5 units of unstable mutagen in total. So, 1... 2, 3, 4, and finally 5. There are a bunch of different mutations in the game, and most of them are very subtle, but some of them are quite noticeable. Like, for example, the plants can become sentient, they can glow, they can increase them. There we go. That one, the 4-unit one, is now glowing. And here's the cool thing about mutations. If I clip this wheat plant, and also, as you can see, it gained a ton of potency. It's up to 44. If I clip it and plant it over here, it'll instantly glow. This plant will inherit everything from its parent plant, and it will glow immediately. And if I clip it again, you'll see that it has the 44 potency still, and this one will glow. So that is how you can try to aim for positive mutations. But you got to be careful, because if you run out of seeds, well, then you're going to have to order more, which cargo can always get, which isn't a problem. But if you're careful, you can always have surplus seeds. You can basically never run out of seeds unless you're growing mushrooms, and even then, you shouldn't run out if you're just being careful. Also, mutations can affect grow speed, which, as you can see, these are not growing evenly. And this 2 units of mutagen has grown the fastest. So since I have a large sample size, this one is a very potent positive... this is also a screaming plant, so if I harvest it, it will scream. Oh, and also it's hard as wood. That's another mutation, so I'm going to have to chop it down with an axe. And yes, this is a fast-growing, screaming wheat plant. This one is dying, which is another form of mutation. The 3 units of mutagen is actually an unhealthy plant. So right here alone... Oh, and the one unit of mutagen is also unhealthy. And the 5 unit is unhealthy. There is a lot of randomness in this. Also, you can see this one is taking a lot of water, and these are taking water. To refill water, it's really easy. You just take your bucket, find the water dispenser in your room or your sink, and you just water them, and you can really just wait for the blue light. Rather simple. But of all the plants that are dying, I could easily just shovel them up and try again to get more positive mutations. It doesn't take much. And the 4 mutagen one is done. And now we have giant glowing wheat bushels. And yes, you'll probably see these a lot. People like to use them to break the lighting because you can grow a ton of them. And yeah, so it seems like 1, 3, and 5 were a bust. 2 apparently is not growing that fast. I'm not entirely sure why it was growing that fast, but 2 is kind of funny because it's screaming. But it seemed like 4 was by far the most useful plant. It has high yield and is glowing. It seems to only inhibit positive traits. So that is what it means by observing. I'm sorry if I am not explaining it as good as I possibly could. It is literally a trial and error. You could look up a list of the mutations. Again, I'll show you this. The in-game one does have a list of along the mutations, like long life. As you can see here, the one I had was not high yield. I had high potency and bioluminescence, and this one, the one that requires sharp tools to harvest, and I had screaming, which is not there. So really, that's about all I got. I probably missed a thing or two, and as you can see, the bad mutated plants are all dead. So, well, they're not going to ever survive. Even if you clip them and replant them, they are just a bad seed type. You want to toss those ones out. and by toss them out, I mean rip them up. I hope this explains things. It is very much trial and error. It is not a high pressure job at all. So feel free to learn at your own pace in game. Feel free to experiment. You're not going to hurt anyone. The worst you're going to do is start kudzu. And if you do start kudzu, always remember you have access to Weed Spray and Plant Be Gone, which annihilates kudzu. And that's about it. I'm sure there are way more experienced botanists in this game. I have only played it a little bit, just enough to at least understand it. So feel free to ask around the community to get more specific help than what I can provide.